Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another one of my broadcasts, podcasts, iPods, loves, whatever you call them. Um, I'd like to talk a little bit today about myths and misconceptions of solution focused work. And this came up really well for me when I saw there's a group I follow on Twitter called Solution Focused Brief Therapy Essex, a group of youngish social workers who are doing really great stuff with SF. And they just came out with one of their tweets which said, how did you deal with that? Now, we've often heard, how did you cope with something? How did you manage something? But then they used a different word. How did you deal with that? The presumption that you dealt with something. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a great choice of words, a really kind of nice little nuancy move in SF. And the thing that I guess I found really refreshing is this is a relatively new group of solution focused practitioners. And I say new, I mean I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. They've been using SF for less than 5 years, maybe less than 2 years. Some of them. And they come up with this fantastic nuance, and it kind of made me think. There's these myths around that you've got to have been doing solution focus for 30 years. You've had to have met Steve and Insu or had a lunch or a walk with them to manage to come up with these new ideas around SF, or you have to be on some board or some association kind of person to do this. But actually, that's a myth, and I'm going to look at some more myths today. So one of the myths, really, for me, is that you need to have been doing solution focus for a long time to make any advances and developments in it. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I often hear people who are relatively new to the solution focus world. Coming up with fantastic new ideas, and I'm often intrigued to watch new people in the field, more so sometimes than old farts like me who've been doing it a long while. So that's one little myth. And then it got me thinking about what are the other myths around solution focus. And I'm going to be honest here and say I kind of bought into one of those myths. So the next myth for me is the idea of goals in solution focus. And certainly when I wrote a book in 2011, I wrote a section on goals. I wouldn't do that now. Goals are binary. Goals are achieved or not achieved, and there's always a place for goals. I have certain goals in sports activities, but in solution focused therapy, a goal is very restricting. As I said, it's binary. You achieve it or you don't achieve it. When actually, a preferred future, a desired outcome, best hopes are a journey, really, and everything along the way in that journey is useful. Everything along the way that you learn, that you see, that others notice is useful. So goals are more of a myth around solution focus as well. Other myths. This is a long-standing one, but actually in solution focus we don't work on a therapeutic alliance. What a load of nonsense. We do. We do. We may not make it an explicit purpose in a therapy as some therapeutic models do, but of course we have to have an alliance. If we don't have an alliance, we can't talk to people because they won't talk to us. Um, the reality is that the evidence shows, lots and lots of evidence, that therapeutic alliance is important to people. So I'm going to challenge that and say it's not necessarily a therapeutic alliance, it's a working alliance. People need to be able to work with us, and we need to be able to work with them. So they have to let us work with them. The best way of achieving that in the solution focused world, I believe, in solution focused therapy particularly, is that we establish early on best hopes, preferred future, desired outcome. So basically, we're working to the client's agenda. If you work into somebody else's agenda, then you can't not have an alliance because you're working for them. You're almost in servitude in some ways. They're the person who's coming. They're the customer. It's their agenda, their locus of control, and we are doing our best to help them achieve that agenda or notice steps along the way to that agenda. So yes, there is a working on therapeutic alliance, and an easy way of breaking that is to introduce your own ideas, your own agenda, your own questions that are not based on what the client's brought. that will break the alliance. I'm sure. So yeah, therapeutic alliance exists in solution focus. What other myths are there? Ah, okay. A myth that you have had to had meetings or conversations or contact with some of the founders of Solution Focus to be able to be a voice that's heard in the SF world. I often see message boards and lists, and people preface their statements with, "Oh, once when I talked to Steve, he said this, therefore I'm doing this." Um, Look, this is no critique of anything that Steve or Insu or any of the founders said. We owe them a great debt of gratitude. Um, they were in a developmental stage of solution focused therapy. We're all in developmental stages of our own therapeutic work. Um, and I know Steve changed his mind on some of the things that he said initially. I could go into them, but there's no purpose really. I know other therapists, myself included, have changed their minds on things. Um, the fact that people had a relationship with founders of SF is great, and they should be proud of that. It doesn't make their voices any more or less important in the solution focused world, and I think that's where I come from. I can hear things from people, I can see things that people have written that are brand new to the SF world, and I think, wow, that's made me think. That's going to change my practice a little bit. So this myth of association with means importance of a message is not really something I subscribe to. Other myths and misconceptions. There's a misconception in SF that we don't deal with emotion. It's a long-standing one. There's been books written, Eve Lipchick and other people, but the reality is we're human beings. We can't not deal with emotion. Um, whether we deal with emotions specifically in a solution-focused setting, or whether emotions and the expression of those emotions are related to the focus of a work is a slightly different topic, but we do deal with emotions. So if you're new to SF and watching this, we don't shy away from emotions, but actually we don't necessarily focus on them. But that's important. Um, what else? What else? What else? What else? What else? Okay, let's have a think about the order of things. When I first started doing solution focus, there was this idea that you had to do things in order. And so, for instance, you had to ask scales, you had to ask miracle question. In the next session, you had to ask what's got better. And if you didn't do all that, you wasn't really doing solution focus. And this is kind of been embedded as a misconception, as a myth, by some things like the EBTA protocol. It's a research protocol. If you're going to research SF, you've got to do things in a certain way. I think a lot of accreditation processes are looking at certain techniques to be used in a certain way to ensure that that's SF. I think that's a narrowing of what SF is. I think SF is broader than that. SF is much more of a thought process, much more of a um, way of being, much more of a view of people in a certain way. We see people in a way in SF, and we approach things in a way in SF which isn't restricted to the techniques or the order of things. Okay, so how we view people, how we um, interact with people is often more important than the techniques we use. And a good example of that would be the difference between, say, a cognitive approach, a cognitive behavioral approach, and SF. In one cognitive behavioral, there is a view that somebody's coming with a problem. There is a view that somebody's coming with a maladaptive behavior, with perhaps a dysfunctional part of their behavior, something that needs to change, something that needs to be challenged and worked on. And look, I'm no expert in CBT, but clearly the view of people is in a certain way, and the expert is a therapist who has the answers, who has the techniques and the approaches to help that person. In SF, we view people as functional, as competent, as willing to change, as ready to change, as doing the best they can given any set of given circumstances. And that view informs the conversations we have with people. Um, those conversations may or may not follow a particular order of questions, may or may not follow, but in every session we ask scaling questions, or in every session we ask questions around the miracles. It may also not mean that we have to ask what's got better at the beginning of the second sessions. But again, the way we talk to people, the view we have of people is more important than the order in which we ask certain questions. Although all questions, of course, have to be based on the last answer, and all answers, we hope, are related to best hopes, preferred futures, desired outcomes of a person that's sitting in front of us. I'm going to leave it there. There are more myths and more misconceptions, but here's a challenge for you guys. And write down a myth or conception in the comments section of this video, and I'll try and address it. If you have a myth or conception that you've addressed and how you've addressed it, really, really grateful to hear that. Until the next time and the next shirt, I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you.